welcome to our Innovators Toolkit for this week. I'm so excited. This is one I've personally been looking forward to for a long time, and I'm so glad you've come out and take a little time out of the midterms craziness to join us and hopefully refresh your mind a little bit with some new conversation. So today our guest is Rhonda Bolton, and she graduated from the University of Houston with a degree in economics, and then joined the tribe and graduated from the Marshall White School of Law at William & Mary in 1996, earning her JD. Rhonda now works as the founder and principal diversity, equity, and inclusion advisor at Include Me LLC, a consultancy that focuses on helping organizations develop and execute corporate visions based in Orange County, California. And today she'll be talking to us a bunch about breaking down silos, a topic which I'm sure applies to your life and also that you can see applies to so much of the world we live in right now. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rhonda.
My pleasure.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me make sure that I allow you to share your screen.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. All right. So thanks everyone for being here. I will just kind of start with the question that was asked. So when I was asked about a skill or a practice that I would like to share as part of an innovator's toolkit, I immediately thought about the practice of breaking down silos. And by silos, I mean situations where either people or functions or both are isolated from one another. And the reason I thought of that is because in my mind, at least, and I know people agree with me, silos are the arch enemy of innovation. So I do want to put my remarks in context, though. I think that a lot of the skills that I'm going to talk about will be most applicable in the work context. But that's not to say that you won't find situations where you observe that there's a silo and it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And the type of thought processes I'm going to talk about, wouldn't be useful, for example, maybe in the academic setting. But I did just want to say that I'm going to speak from my work experience. And so a lot of these things and the examples that I'm going to provide are ones that have happened in the work setting. So I want to offer up that context. So let's move on to the next slide. So today, here's a little bit more about what I want to share. So I talked about context. And I will share what my experience is, just so, I kind of frame things, where I'm coming from with this, how I've figured these things out. I promise that there will be just a few war stories, not a whole presentation of war stories, although war stories can be interesting. And then we'll talk about how silos hamper innovation, just to center our conversation, because you'll see that I feel pretty strongly that silos more often than not are not useful. They have a purpose, but I just don't agree that they are useful. And then we'll get down to, tips. So what I call those is the silo busting do's and don'ts. So first of all, who am I and why is it that I think I know about this topic? So as Sonia mentioned, I graduated from law school in 1996, and I went into private legal practice at a large law firm in Washington, D.C. As part of that experience, a colleague and I decided that we would start our firm's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. And for shorthand, I'll refer to diversity, equity, inclusion as DEI. And we did that based just on what our observations were about the firm's hiring of women and minority attorneys, and the fact that we wanted to see, and the firm also as a whole wanted to see, more diversity in our classes of attorneys that we were hiring, and then hopefully retaining for 8 years, and then, promoting those folks into the senior ranks of the firm. As part of that process, I didn't know anything about DEI when we started, but I started to learn about a lot of different things. And what was surprising to me was I was learning about more than just kind of the HR aspect of it. So, we went in initially thinking about, what we call employee representation. But where our investigations and our solutions took us was, it was a lot broader landscape. So we ended up looking into areas like the assignment system and how the firm was branding itself. I mean, the just when you think about looking at something holistically, we were just kind of surprised, like, wow, if we're going to try to solve this problem, we've got to look at it a lot more broadly than what we originally anticipated. So, I became very passionate about what we were doing. I really enjoyed it because I thought it was a way of, helping people and helping this organization to operate in a more innovative fashion by having, more diverse, pool of attorneys. And I parlayed that experience into my formal practice. So DEI became part of my quote unquote day job, which was really great. And I started to advise clients on DEI matters, and had a client ask me to come and work directly for them to start their very first DEI initiative. So there I was again, starting, from pretty much a blank slate. And again, finding that in order to find some really highly effective solutions, I was looking at all, kinds of things in many, many different areas. So again, we were looking at marketing, we were looking at supply chain, we were looking at distribution, product distribution. It was just really amazing. As part of that process, you're looking across an enterprise and you're looking across functions. You have to be able to work across functions. And so this practice of silo busting became very important. It was critical to being successful in DEI, because that just happens to be my philosophy. And that's the philosophy that I, promote now in my work as a consultant. So I started my firm, left corporate practice and started my firm about 3 years ago. And that is my, kind of, won't call it secret sauce, but that is the thing that I specialize in doing. And that's one of the things that people come to ask me about is enterprise-wide, how do we implement DEI initiatives? So I'm not the person that's just looking at, someone's recruiting and retention, although those are important. So again, it all goes back to being able to think broadly and figuring out ways to break down those silos. So I put this little light bulb here after or below my William and Mary law, because lawyers aren't known for being innovative necessarily, but I was really very fortunate in that this whole silo busting thing gave me this idea that I kind of felt like, gee, this is great, I can do this for a living and marry my work with my passion, which is a blessing. So there's the light bulb. And thank you, W&M, for providing such an awesome education, because I thoroughly enjoyed my time at the school. So next up, okay, my animation is gone because we're having some little technical difficulties here. But I wanted to talk about why silos hamper innovation. So we're kind of all on the same, all on the same page about this. I don't think I've ever talked to anyone who's ever said, I think, as a matter of principle, silos are a good thing, but, we'll take that into consideration in just a moment. So when I think about innovation, I think about leadership. So what is a leader responsible for doing? That leader is that person who is supposed to have the vision. That's the person who's supposed to be seeing around corners, thinking about what's possible, thinking about what might at first seem to be impossible. But it's hard to be that leader. So hard to be that innovator if you're sitting in a silo. So what silos do, in my observation, is they encourage tunnel vision, which is why I've got this picture of a tunnel here. Silos obscure the big picture, which is why I've got this kind of foggy picture of a landscape and all you can see is just this one tree, and you can't see, kind of what's out on the horizon. And while silos may develop as a matter of efficiency, which, as far as that goes, makes sense. People should specialize as an organization grows so everybody doesn't have to be a jack of all trades. At the same time, there's a balance that has to be struck between that specialization and some, people, kind of falling into silos such that they can't see beyond their own function or their own group or their own work to be able to look at things in a way that will help them visualize, what might be possible. So in my view, what I see more often than not is silos leading to inefficiency. So that's why we've got that inefficiency sign. So, kind of my whole big visual picture when I think about this entire issue is all of those things. So inefficiency and not the inability to see the big picture and tunnel vision, don't lead to the bright idea. They don't lead to innovation and that leadership that an innovator has. And when you think about some entrepreneurs who are really, really well known now, the thing is, they were the people that were thinking like, wow, what if we did X? And they had to be thinking broadly. They couldn't be like narrowly focused and accomplish what they have accomplished. So, that really amazing innovation to me is synonymous with leadership. So moving on, in my work as a consultant, one of the beauties is I get to observe a lot of different organizations and how they function. And so one thing that does stick in my mind and is disappointing, frankly, is when, I see this, organization that's pretty successful and I see silo thinking still going on in the organizations, and I can see where that mode of thinking is holding the organization back. So, in a recent example, I was working with a firm in the financial sector on a program design, and my colleagues and I had been called in by a person inside the organization who had envisioned something that cut across several different functions. And it was a really cool idea. But because it cut across different functions, it meant that, it would be involving, different budgets, different departments, management, et cetera. So during the first strategy meeting, though, I could tell that the siloed thinking was going to be an issue because people, and they understood the cross-functional character of the proposal, but they kept getting hung up on which bucket are we going to put this in? Well, we can't figure out what department this would go under or who this would belong to. And the conversation ended up just going around and around and around. And, it didn't really go as far as we had hoped in terms of, advancing this idea because people kept thinking about the buckets. And what needed to happen, in my view, was, folks just saying, okay, wow, okay, so we like this idea. We see that the idea can ultimately accomplish the mission of the organization. And we're just going to have to figure out how to do this in a way potentially that we haven't done before, but think broadly and creatively so that we can figure out how to get this done. So, when we left that meeting, folks were talking about buckets still, and I just was kind of like, wow, okay, that sounds like that may be a lost opportunity for that organization to do something really innovative and creative. And I had a similar experience personally when I pulled together a team of folks from across functions and started working on a project that was very successful for the period of time that it operated. But once again, a lack of vision is what, stopped that project in its tracks. There were, we had great leaders initially that saw that, this particular project could accomplish some really cool, innovative things. Yeah, okay, so forget about the fact that we've never tried it before. Let's try it and let's see what happens. And so, as time wore on, we had different leaders who were more in the mode of, well, but why is this department helping to do this? Well, why is that department helping to do that? And it's like, well, it's a cross-functional thing, but, they were hung up on, well, what bucket is this supposed to be in? And so, the project couldn't operate with folks, being hung up on, well, I don't understand, why these departments are working together and why that department is not just focused on, doing what it had always done before. So there you go, another, in my view, another lost opportunity to innovate. So let's talk in practical terms. So these are my tips. I call them do's and don'ts for silo busting and innovation. So here are the do's. Do be curious. Always be observant, looking for situations where, you know, things operate in a way, you just kind of use your instinct, like, wow, could that, could we do that differently? Or, I wonder if we, did this and did that, what would happen? So being curious, um, always asking yourself why something is the way that it is, and especially if there's a process or something that an organization does and it doesn't make any sense, or it doesn't operate very well, or it leaves this huge gap. Just be thinking, even if you're a really junior person, there's nothing that stops you from being curious and asking questions, even if you just ask those questions in your own mind and think about it, in that way, because that mode of thinking will serve you well in the future. Do also know the organization's ultimate mission, though, because while organizations put all kinds of, nice, cool sounding stuff on their website about what their mission is, what I'm talking about is the ultimate mission. So, for example, if it's a consumer products company, its ultimate mission is to sell their products to consumers. If it's a professional services organization, its ultimate mission at bottom is to acquire more clients and get more money out of the existing clients. So the reason why that's important is if you come up with an innovative idea that is going to require busting silos, and you may encounter some curiosity and maybe some resistance, you need to be able to show how that idea, if implemented, is going to help the organization achieve its ultimate mission. That is the most persuasive argument that you have for why the organization should follow through and adopt, what you're suggesting, or invest in what you're suggesting. How is it going to impact the bottom line? It may take, several different steps. Because if you're talking about, I don't know, handling copying, I don't know if people still copy things, but if you're talking about doing something like that in a different way, and people may say, okay, well, I don't see how that impacts the bottom line. Everything impacts the bottom line. And so if you can draw that line, I've seen it happen time and time again. That's your most persuasive argument to get someone to help you out in implementing whatever this idea is. So definitely build a good reputation, especially when you're new to an organization. Always make sure that you are, reliable, credible, capable, because that way, you will have developed respect. And so when you come to someone and say, hey, I have an idea for how to do something different, and it's going to require that we, bring in these folks from this department, or, try to secure resources from that area, they're going to listen because you have a good reputation. And so that's just that, that's kind of true with it's the case no matter what, just to develop a good reputation. Build productive relationships, of course, inside your work group, but also outside your work group, because, if you are going to need to bust those work group silos, it's helpful to know, who's responsible for what, and, kind of how their job fits into the organizational whole. And so, to me, I've always been curious about what other people do, and just ask respectfully. Of course, you may have to, kind of do observation at first, and then once you get to know people, just say, hey, that's really cool. What do you do exactly, or whatever. Learn all that and just kind of file it away, because that also helps you with your kind of, more broad-based thinking is, knowing how the different parts of the organization function when you're coming up with a, solution or thinking about a different way to do things. Now, here's another thing. Know who your supporters might be, especially whether, how your boss would come down on, this particular idea that you're proposing. And, it'll be pretty apparent, I think, fairly quickly, kind of what kind of mindset your boss has, because, if you say, oh, I have a neat idea, and here's what it is, and your boss says, wow, that's really interesting, let's see what we can do about that, or hey, let's share that with so and so, and see what they think, and maybe we can work together to figure out how to implement that. That's really great. If on the other hand your boss is like, look, Junior, just stick to what I've told you to do, and you can do the dreaming outside of work. Okay, that doesn't sound so positive. And you just want to be really careful about, you want to make sure your relationship with your boss is always a positive one. And so I think it's just really important to know kind of, kind of where your boss sits on the innovation, I don't know, spectrum. And then I would say, of course, this is true in any kind of situation, be humble, especially if you're the new person on the block. There's a lot you don't know and a lot that you want to learn. And you'll be more successful in that process if you approach it with humility, rather than the opposite. And the same goes for, trying too hard to look like the hero, if your idea is really successful. Absolutely make sure that you recognize for your accomplishments. So, keep anything in writing, any texts or, Slack messages or what have you that are commending you for your work. Make sure you always keep those. And make sure that you include, whatever you've done. If you've come up with an, innovative idea or something that improves efficiency, make sure that that's always noted on your performance review. But, don't go overboard with it, because, a workplace is an organization, like a school, and, nobody likes it when someone's really overbearing about anything. So moving on to the don'ts. So, kind of in keeping with this expectation, that you build a good reputation and things like that, make sure you keep up with your assigned work. And, don't expect support if you're not keeping up with your assigned work, because not keeping up with your assigned work is a justification for your boss to say to you, no, you don't have time for any of these, side projects or additional projects that you want to, get involved in. You haven't finished what I've asked you to finish. So you don't ever want to be in a situation like that. There are some companies that have built-in innovation time, kind of into their workflow, which is awesome. So they just let employees do whatever, like maybe, you get 1 day a week to work on just whatever you want to do. I think that is the most awesome setup, because that really does give people that chance to dream and think outside the box, and they are able to collaborate with one another. And I'm thinking of one organization in particular, and their folks have come up with some really, really innovative stuff, just because the organization makes that space for them to go ahead and do that work. So it's like, here, we're going to give you time to do this assigned work, and then we're going to give you time to just dream. And I think that's, a really productive way to go about encouraging people to innovate. Okay, so another thing is, don't discount office politics. And it's unfortunate that office politics might come into play, but I have seen it happen. If you, kind of want to bridge across that like departmental silo and say, I have this idea and I would really love to get, Sally to help me with it. Sally's boss might not go along with it. And you may be like, what? Like, this is a good idea and this may benefit us. So what's the deal? Who knows? That boss, unfortunately, and I'm just going to come out and say it, that who may not be a very good boss. They may be insecure. They may be territorial about their direct reports. And, for whatever reason, and it could be a legitimate reason. Don't get me wrong. It may be that unbeknownst to you, Sally's got a whole bunch of unfinished stuff on her plate, and her boss is going to, kind of hold her to her responsibilities before she can go and work on, this cross-functional project that, your department has come up with. But a lot of times you would be surprised, it's just pure office politics. And so, it's frustrating, it's wasteful, but, it's just something you have to try to figure out how to work around. Or, there are times when you just have to be like, okay, I'm not going to mess with that situation because that, doesn't sound good. Similarly, don't discount your organization's culture. And it won't take you long to figure out whether you're in an organization that just does lip service to being innovative. It's like, oh, on their website, oh, yes, we're really innovative. We love innovation, but yet, the higher ups are sitting in an echo chamber, only listening to ideas from certain people, or they don't listen to feedback from every level of the organization. If it's that kind of situation and innovation is what you love, you just may be happier someplace else. I'm just going to, put it out there. So, I want to conclude by saying that you can adopt an innovative silo busting mindset no matter where you are and in all types of settings. It doesn't matter whether you go to work in a small organization or a large organization. Be observant and be thinking about what works well and what doesn't work well, what works efficiently, where there are gaps that need to be filled, but maybe nobody has had the chance to act on them. And be thinking about solutions in the broadest terms you can imagine. Don't limit your thinking to, wow, well, what could just my team do, or what could just this department over here do. Silo busting is a key skill to have if you want to be an innovator, especially in a complex and large organization. And take it from someone who's done a lot of hiring. Being known as an innovator is like gold. If you develop a reputation as an innovator and someone who can, work across functions, and work across departments, those people are thought of as creative and bold and self-starters and tenacious. And those are all qualities that are necessary to your professional development. So that's all I have here. And I've got my email address on the bottom of this slide in case you want to contact me. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, yay! I always feel the need to like unmute and do a little applause because it is just us and it is Zoom. But I want to make sure that that is recognized as a fabulous presentation. I loved so much of what you touched on. So I'm really just gonna ask you to expand on some of the things really that I found super interesting. One of which being, like I think a lot of people who will be viewing this presentation are in the position of, they've done internships and going out and being that junior person in the office, as you mentioned. And I think sometimes innovation and silo busting in particular is something that, I don't really think, I mean, me personally, I've been in professional situations and I've been like, yeah, this would be a really good idea, but it's not really my place. Or, like, I don't know who to talk to. And would they even think this is a good idea? And then am I going to be looked at as, more of an expense to the organization than, an asset. So I would love for you, I know you mentioned a few things, but to expand on when you're in that situation, how do you sort of approach that and, find allies in that way and silo bust even as a young person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I believe me, I get it. I was an intern, eons ago, so I totally get it. Okay, so silo busting and finding allies, let me first talk about that. So it's just by talking to people, and it's just by meeting as many people as you can and just getting to know what they do, especially if you're an intern or a junior person. They'll be accustomed to people, saying, hey, I'm new, or I'm just here for the summer, really curious about what you do. Can we have coffee or something? Just anything at all. Can we talk in the break room? I'm just really curious. And most people, will want to be helpful because people like to talk about themselves and they like to talk about what they do. So I think most people appreciate, curiosity and interest. And that is the way that you can just kind of, figure out like who would be interested if you had a neat idea? Who would just be interested in talking about it? So if you approached it not necessarily from, I think you should do this, but okay, so I was thinking about what you told me, and I was curious, so has the organization ever done it like this before, or has the organization ever considered that, whatever, and you just kind of frame it in terms of, I was just thinking. And if the person's like, oh yeah, we tried that and it didn't work and blah, 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 well, then you've learned something there. Or we've thought about that and we decided, or maybe like, budgets changed. Budgets are like, there's
Yeah.
always budgets. And we decided, we didn't have the resources to invest in it, but, so you learn something there too. And you just never know, you might talk to somebody who's like, yeah, let's try that again. Or let's think about that. And so, a couple of things have happened. That person has seen that you're thinking, and you're thinking creatively, and you're thinking about like the enterprise and its mission as a whole. These are the hallmarks of leadership. And when people are kind of observing, the new folks, who just come through the door, the folks who kind of have that leadership mindset, even from the beginning, it's kind of apparent who they are, because they just think differently than everybody else. Or they just think, on a couple of different planes, so they think differently, or they think the same as everybody else down here, but like they've got all these different levels of stuff going on in their brain. And so that's the way that I always was. And even if I ended up just keeping it inside here, because I did sense that it was an environment where it's like, no, the interns are just there to be to be there. It's practice for that mode of thinking, of going across functions, going across, departments, and that more global mindset that you have to have, because as you rise up through the ranks, you can't just be thinking about, like accounting practices down here. You've, got to be thinking about all this, your thinking has to be much broader. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Just like for the practice and for the sake of developing yourself as well.
Yeah.
And I also, you said this again, but in your presentation, saying leadership is innovation. And so I was thinking back to a situation that I was personally in the summer where me and a fellow intern I was responsible for creating a lot of like standard operating procedures for whatever the organization was doing at the time. It was a new program. It was like, happening as building the plane as you fly it. And so they were like, Sonia, like, we need you to like organize this. And I was like, okay. And I thought, it would be really great to have Google Doc, like just to use Google Docs in this situation. Cause that's what I'm used to doing for school. And, like I suggested that idea, and my boss was really wonderful. I'd worked with him the summer before. And so I felt confident in suggesting this. But naturally he was like, okay, Sonia, like, great, you do it. And I was like, okay. And, in my head, I was like, yeah, why would you think that it would go any other way? But, I kind of bit off more than I could chew, as you mentioned. And I was like, wait. So I'm just wondering if you have any tips for that situation where, you say innovation is leadership. How do you then, I was in a situation, I was like, okay, I have confidence, but I don't know if I have enough confidence to lead this. And so when you're put in that situation, what do you do from there? What's like your course of action?
Yeah. Well, okay. So if you recognize immediately that, wow, okay, so this is more than a one person job. If you have that level of comfort with the person that you're talking to, you got to tell them, okay, that would be great. I want to do this. I'm happy to lead it. It is more than a one person job. So, can we recruit maybe, one other person so we can work together on this? Because, the end game is we want to get it done. And that person is experienced. They've been around. They know a one person job and a 5-person job when they see one. And so, I don't think there's any harm in you've already proposed the idea. I don't think there's harm, in going just a little step further and saying, okay, so I recognize, or I think I recognize, how much time we're going to need to invest in this. And okay, so I could do it, but it would take me a year. If we're going to get it done this summer, I think that this is going to be a two-person job. So can we recruit someone? And then, you either get help to do that, or, you're told, no, we're not going to be able to do that. So let's just do as much as we can in the time that we have. That would certainly be my approach, and has been my approach, working with summer interns. And I love the ideas that interns have. I love, love, love. That is one of my favorite things to do, is to work with interns, because, you look at ideas with fresh eyes. And, I think it's kind of a shame when a group of interns comes in and they're there the whole summer, and, if they're not given the opportunity to offer up whatever ideas they have. I think in most places, the interns are given a project, either as a group or individually, because people want to see, like, what are your ideas? So yeah, my advice would be, just go ahead and take that extra half step and say, okay, let's talk resources.
Exactly. It's always that extra of like, okay, like I get up all my energy to be like, okay, this is my idea. And then they're like, you do it. And I'm like, okay.
That's always going to happen, no matter what, intern or not. That's always going to happen.
Exactly. And then I lose all my momentum and I'm like, okay, all right. But that's super practical and really good advice.
That's a very good question.
I was just curious. But okay, cool. So that was one of my things. And then I was wondering, just your perspective, you've had a lot of experience and, a lot of higher education experience as well as a student and as a professional. And so what do you see? I know a lot of people are frustrated with a lot of the silos in higher education. And specifically in DEI when it comes to higher education. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that area, and if you have, any ideas as to, how to break those specific silos down.
Ooh, those are tough.
Yeah.
Yes. Education is, just it is one of the most siloed settings that I've encountered. And as it has been explained to me, it's just like, it's turf, it's like, well, you got this professional school over here, and then you've got this school over there, and they do things their way, and they do things that, so the most effective thing that I have seen is where a chief diversity officer is brought in at the university level. That is the person who this is true in any context. There needs to be a person who has that 30,000 foot view of what's going on across an organization. And so while, individual schools or departments may have their, DEI leader, there should be at least a dotted line, reporting structure up to someone who's able to see things, across the organization, and then who also reports to whoever is over the organization as a whole. And so in the case of a university, that would be, the university's president, or maybe if, it's a chancellor, whatever the label is, because say for example that you got one school that's experimented with some stuff and has had tremendous success in student recruiting by doing X. If nobody talks to anybody else and nobody knows what's going on up here at this level, is everybody else going to know about this, the other schools, and say, hey, why don't we give this a try and see if this might work for us, to see how we could adapt it? It's a missed opportunity. So that is what I've seen to be most effective, is like, even if you can't like chop them down and the silos are still there, you've got this structure over the top of the silos that can look down into each one of the silos and see what's in there, and take something out of this silo, and put it in that silo to help the organization as a whole work more effectively.
Wow, that's such good advice. Oh my goodness. Yeah, because I know I think people are frustrated, like this committee meeting and that committee meeting, and what really, I know I'm like speaking to the choir, but what really comes out of this. But that's fabulous. I think yeah, I think people, and I think definitely me, I think like, oh, like it has to be this big change and then it'll be solved, but it can really be little things.
Yeah,
And
that's
intermix.
absolutely true. You're right, Sonia. Yes.
Cool, cool. Oh my gosh. Well, this is fabulous. I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I know you said we'd be done by 11:30. But thank you so much. This has been super helpful. And yeah, I thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.